Welcome, Gary. It's a pleasure having you today to discuss a bit more about peak performance, leadership, and wellness.
Yep.
So, Gary Seelhorst here. Please give us a quick intro, a quick maybe bio summary of what you do, and then
Mhm.
how you got into this place helping others.
Yeah, thanks, Lily. I'm really excited to be on this program. I've seen some of your other podcasts. It looks like a great venue to discuss all things wellness and performance related. So I am an executive coach and a sort of performance related coach. What I do is I'm actually a recovering executive myself. So I've been through quite a few ventures myself, both with Fortune 100 companies, but also in the startup arena as well. So I kind of really backed into executive coaching probably about 2 or 3 years ago, really more 3 years ago, where I was working with a lot of ex Navy SEALs as they were coming out of these wellness retreats and they were looking for jobs. Basically, they had retired from the military and they were looking to figure out how to apply a lot of their elite talents that they had acquired over the years. Which was kind of interesting is that a lot of them didn't really have a whole lot of confidence as they were trying to matriculate into the private sector. And I was there basically saying, no, please, the private sector needs what you've done. You're elite. A lot of them have engineering degrees, logistics backgrounds. I mean, stuff that's really translatable into the private sector. So I help them to kind of find their center and really where their passion and their energy was, and then really kind of find some confidence in them as well in what they've done. And I pulled a few strings and got them some interviews, and then they ended up in the finance industry. One of them actually got into Amazon with his logistics background. So I was doing this all pro bono. I just really liked, the Navy SEALs and what they stood for, what they had been through. And I just wanted to kind of pay them back a little bit for what they've done for the country. And it felt so good to me. It just felt right. And they started kind of referring me to other people in the private sector. And they were telling them that I was an executive coach. I really hadn't labeled myself at that point because I was really just doing this for fun. And then I started to think, well, maybe these people were willing to pay me to go through my services. And so I started to build a business around it. I ended up getting a couple of certifications around it. I don't know that I implement all of the different things that I've learned, but with my MBA and organizational behavior, my a lot of the experience I've had in building teams in the private sector with startups and things like that. I just had a lot of really serviceable background for a lot of these folks, and that just kind of grew from there. And it was all pretty much word of mouth that I was getting all these referrals. And that was really interesting to me because I just never really thought that this was going to be a business. And then I put a website together, got an LLC and did the whole thing. And now it, come off and running. And so I coach a lot of folks in sort of a one-on-one setting, but also in a team setting. I work in a lot of different sectors, commercial real estate, biotech, logistics, finance. So I've gotten quite a bit of a taste of a lot of different industries and how they work. And so I really like working in team environments. I was a former Division I athlete myself. So I really like to study high performing teams, and talking with a lot of the Navy SEALs, you learn about how high functioning teams work, how you have to look to certain objectives that are above everyone else and making sure everyone is staying in their lane doing their job, but also respect each other and learn to work with each other. You don't have to like each other, but you do have to love each other is what I say. You have to respect each other and all buy into the same objective. So anyway, so that's kind of what I do. I'm excited to talk to you today about some of the techniques that I use.
Perfect. Thank you for your sharing with us your story. It's a really interesting story and how it came together, and what you're doing sounds like you're really passionate about it. You didn't plan for it to happen this way, but it's amazing. Sometimes when you're going through an endeavor, you try to test different things or help others, as you mentioned, is when you can find a great venue to share what you do best, and then help others do or are success at what they're good at.
Mhm.
So talking
Absolutely.
about high performing teams and also the background you have, like being an athlete, I find there's a lot of ties to it. If you have this discipline and probably focusing as well on the nutrition, the health, it might also have some effects, like positive effects. But I'll pause and see
Mhm.
what you have to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it all kind of starts with health and wellness. Because if you're a sick individual, you're not going to be performing at your best. And there's so many individuals, and this happened with me as well. And I can tell you a little bit of a story about how it affected me greatly. As I said, I was an athlete for years. I was on a cycling team when I worked at Pfizer. And then there was a time where I started in the startup world, and I was working a lot. I was traveling a lot. I was kind of falling out of shape a little bit. I wasn't too overweight or anything, but there was a lot of stress. I was married, just had a kid, and there was just so much going on, and I wasn't really taking care of myself. I wasn't eating well. Wasn't really exercising as much as I should, and I had a lot of stress going on in my life, and I ended up having a heart attack. And it was really scary to be someone who was 43 years old and, being in the cath lab and having a nurse tell you, well, it's good you came in when you did. And you sort of get this feeling of kind of being a ghost where you're like, shoot, I'm kind of living on borrowed time. And that'll make you really have a better understanding of, what it was that led you to that point. And so I kind of took stock in everything that was going on in my life, and really more from a health and wellness standpoint. I started to really look at my diet. I was eating a lot of processed foods. I really, since I was flying a lot, I was eating something that I could just sort of grab on the shelf, and I wasn't drinking a whole lot of water. I was drinking a lot of alcohol too. And those things really affect you. Even if you're not necessarily gaining weight, it just internally you have a lot of inflammation. And this inflammation then cascades into so many other things that, it affects where, your cardiac health, your mental health, sometimes it's something that contributes to, malaise and energy as well. And you're not necessarily focused, and you're not your best self when you're not taking care of yourself. And so that's what I try to teach a lot of the folks right out of the gate. So all of my one-on-one clients, they tend to lose a decent amount of weight while I'm really putting them in a different place from an executive performance standpoint too. So I try to get them to move. I try to get them to eat a little bit better. We usually kind of do sort of more of like a whole food introduction to, so many of them, it's interesting with AI and all this information on the internet. A lot of people still aren't super well informed about the things that affect them. And even with a lot of the groceries that are out there, they would buy, there's still, I kind of made a switch to grass-fed beef a while back, and the organic types of fruits and vegetables. And you wouldn't necessarily think it's going to make a big difference, but with a lot of the pesticides and fungicides, they do have an aggregate effect on you. And I noticed that right off the bat. And a lot of people kind of hem and haw and say, well, it's so much more expensive. I was actually tracking my costs on it as well. And I did notice that, while the initial buy is more expensive if you're doing a product by product comparison, but I don't eat as much either because I'm getting all of the nutrients from the grass-fed beef, from the organic fruits and vegetables, and I don't feel hungry. And because I know, what I've eaten, I track everything. So it's really negligible as far as, what my grocery bill is. And now I've got my kids doing the same thing. And so, it's now it's kind of a family affair. And the more people that you can get involved in it, because with a lot of these executives, and they're mostly male, if they start doing it and they ask their wife or their partner to do it, and then their kids are doing it, then it becomes a lot more sticky, and they keep doing it. And it's not just kind of like a diet, I'm going to do this diet for a little bit and then I'll go back to eating crap, and that's unfortunately what a lot of people do with some of these GLP-1s, the Ozempics. And and I'm not against them at all. But I do think that it's good to get a lot of nutritional counseling, and strength training and a lot of the support while you're doing it, and to think of it as sort of a way to kick you off into better health versus I'm going to be taking this for the rest of my life, So, so I always start with all of those types of things and if they're not really willing to do it and they want to go right into kind of like executive planning, strategic planning, some of them are doing, they want to do a business plan or they're forecasting for the next year, or they just really want me to help to kind of, protect their time and energy, which is a lot of what I do, because so many people they're yes people. They say yes to everything, and they just get bogged down and they don't necessarily focus on what's most important to their job, their career, their company, and their health, really. So I help them to prioritize a lot of what they're doing. And then, I then serve as like an accountability coach as well, because I'm talking with them at least once a week. And then I do a lot of texting and things that sort of remind them of the progress we've made. And, I allow for slip ups. We all are going to fall short at some point. And I don't like it when people necessarily say, all right, well, I messed that up. So, the rest of the day is a kind of a wash too. And then they just go nuts and start to kind of go down the slippery slope. So I'm there to kind of catch them, when they do slip up, and I slip up, it's like we all kind of do. We all have to, kind of allow ourselves to fail. And that's how we kind of learn about what's the best path forward for us. And it's different for everyone because, there's a lot of executive coaches out there, and I don't want to disparage any part of the business, but a lot of them are extensions of a lot of these assessments that are out there, like the Clifton Strengths, DISC, Myers-Briggs. And once you score in those assessments, then they kind of apply a curriculum for that specifically. Whereas I take a lot of those data points and then I formulate something very specific for each individual. And because sometimes people ask me, well, what sort of curriculum do you subscribe to? And I'm like, it depends, and I've seen so many of them over time. I've taken a lot of these assessments, back when I was at Pfizer and Eli Lilly, I was taking a lot of these assessments and then my direct reports would take them. So I had a better understanding of them. So I understand the value of them, but I think you can score differently on those depending on the group that you're around. And also, what time of year it is, if it's like, 5 years later, you might have changed a little bit too. So, so I think, it's really more of a kind of a bespoke curriculum that I put together for folks. So yeah. So again, back to your original question. I start with health and wellness, and that's sort of a non-negotiable. And I think people appreciate that. Sometimes they're resistant to it. Like, hey, I didn't sign up to have you put me on a diet. And so I'm like, well, this is part of the curriculum. And that's usually, with the referrals that come with it, it's one of the first things that they notice, like, hey, I noticed you lost a little weight. What's going on? And then they sort of, hey, this is the coach that I have. And we kind of do a lot of different aspects of executive coaching, which starts with, and a lot of them are starting, they're starting to exercise too, and they haven't done it in a while. And some of them are like high school athletes, maybe even college athletes that just need a little boost. They just need someone to kind of push them in the right direction. So I provide a lot of that support too.
That's amazing. I find those are like foundational pieces so you can operate properly. As you mentioned, if you have a clean diet and you're, instead of eating, I don't know, fast food and the things that are just easy on the go to grab, because I know we have busy lives, but then you feel, I don't know, the feeling when you have that food is not, you're not like completely aware and you don't feel that you can go in a fast manner, fast paced. So I totally feel that's part of the foundational pieces. So then you can excel on what you do. In this case, like for executives, makes total sense. Talking about their families, it's another great thing for them to pass on, right? Not only for them, but for their loved ones to have those habits in place and just make it the way things are. Just sometimes as culture doesn't help us, like, oh, there's a summer festival and we're just getting all the hot dogs, burgers, and that stuff. I find if we do that at home, then whenever you go to a specific event or things, you can have one-offs and we'll be fine. But obviously, I find for myself, since, well, I've always been good with food, but I know the change when I eat something that is not in alignment with my diet and that makes
Oh
me
yeah.
feel energized, it just
Mhm.
throws me off. So
Yeah.
that's totally a great approach. And
Mhm.
then obviously this holistic type of thing, I believe last time that we had a chat offline, you mentioned like this energy, or also like the foundational piece of your beliefs is not that you have to believe or think there's one God, but there's something major, right?
Right. Yeah. No, there's a big spiritual component that I implement, and it doesn't have to be I believe in God, I believe in Allah, I believe it's really just believing in something that's higher than yourself. And that can take the form of a lot of different things too. So there are many people that are maybe getting back to some of their spiritual beliefs that they once had. But it's really helping them to understand that once they ascribe to something higher than themselves, it takes a lot of the onus off of them that they feel so much that they have to control everything. And so once they are able to kind of let go a little bit and sort of let things happen, work hard, get everything going in the right direction, but don't try to control as much as you can. I think a lot of people that have anger issues, and I work with a lot of guys. I mean, most of my clients are men and they're around my age and they have emotional issues around feeling disrespected, or if it's, they get triggered by, it's like in the traffic, and whatever it is. But if you can reframe a lot of what you're looking at as something that's not happening to you, but happening for you, and like, oh, wow, what is this? What is this test for me today? And when you're looking at a lot of these different things in a reframe, it really helps you to kind of save a lot of that energy. You're not giving your energy away to someone who cut you off in on the highway, or someone who may have said something that seemingly was disparaging in a meeting, but they're dealing with their own stuff. It came across poorly, or whatever the case is. Maybe they did mean to say something disparaging because they feel really threatened by you, or they feel threatened by what's going on in their company, and they want to, they need to lash out. But I always teach people, so be part of a community, be part of some sort of like a men's group, gosh, get a golfing group or whatever, something where you're all kind of do something, and then maybe even contributing to something that's charitable in some way, shape, or form. And I did a post on this recently about how when you do things that are not necessarily for you but for others, there's a neurological phenomenon that happens where you start to feel more important yourself, because you've put yourself in a position where you're helping others. That makes you feel a little bit more like an authority, or someone who's doing something that's important for the community, and that immediately makes you feel a lot better. That's why people always feel good when they volunteer. And I'm actually doing that this holiday season for all of my clients. We're all coming up with some sort of event that they can do. If it's giving out turkeys at Thanksgiving, Toys for Tots, go down to an orphanage or a food bank and help out. And I say, do it selfishly. Do it because it's going to help you. Yeah, it's going to help other people too, which is great, but it's going to help you too. So, so that's where I really try to get folks to have a better understanding of looking at something that's beyond you. If it is like helping other kids in schools and getting them fed and things like that, are, definitely things that are going to keep them from, spiraling in their own head about whatever it is that's going on in their brain. So whenever you can do that, it's always going to make your mind a little healthier, and you're not giving away your energy to other people when they are seemingly doing something that may or may not be directed towards you. You got to remember, everyone's got their own stuff going on in their head, and they're not always thinking about you. And more often than not, it's not about you. It's about what's going on in their lives. So, and there was a study that came out recently about how 85% of the things that we fear never happen. So we're getting anxiety over something that really never happens. So, so we try to put everything in its right perspective. And so when people practice this and they do it, and sometimes I can put specific protocols together for them. if it's in the morning or it's in the evening, where they can do some sort of mindfulness exercise. And again, I don't want to sound hippy dippy, or it can be journaling. Journaling is a great form of meditation, because once you think about something and then it goes through the whole process of going through your arm and into your pen and onto the piece of paper. And this is, I don't want people to necessarily do their journals on, on their laptop, and that helps. But, actually getting back to the analog journaling of writing into a journal book and understanding like what it is that you're putting down. If it's gratitude, 3 things I'm happy about today, I'm grateful for, puts you in a different state of mind. 2 things that I want to do, and once you write it down, you feel this commitment to get it done. So there's so much that you can do through a lot of these different meditative events. And I myself kind of struggle a little bit with meditation. I was one of those guys when I started, I would do it for 10 minutes. My mind was spinning. And after the 10 minutes, I was like, well, I could have spent that 10 minutes differently. But the more you do it, it's a practice, it's a skill, the better you get to kind of pulling yourself back and actually not thinking about anything. So once a lot of these guys, stop, they just slow down for a little bit. I get them to kind of, when they wake up, don't grab your phone right away. Wake up earlier, give yourself a little bit of time to, go out and get some sunlight. Look at exactly what's happening, before you hit the ground running with your phone and your laptop and everything else, and move a little bit in the morning too. So that really kind of puts you in a much different headspace. And it's funny, like how, most of the guys that I coach are kind of resistant to it. They're like, all right, you're not going to have me chanting out, in the middle of the forest, are you? I'm like, no, not unless you want to. But, so we start small, and then they start to get a lot more. They see the utility in what is actually happening. And there's so many, great businessmen, throughout history that have had this same type of practice too. So it's not like I'm really sort of telling them anything new. They just have never really tried it, and they haven't. They always say like, I don't have time, and I say, okay, well, we're going to make time where we're going to do this. We're going to get up a half hour earlier, and you're going. Not only are you going to feel a lot better at the end of the day, you're going to. We do some end of the day kind of protocols too. If you're nervous about something, write it down. It sort of gives you license to kind of leave it there, and then, be able to go to bed without thinking about it a ton. So you sleep better. And when you wake up, you're not as tired. So you don't have to worry about not getting that 30 minutes of sleep that you want to get, because you're feeling more refreshed when they get up. So there's a lot of different aspects to what we're doing as far as all of these different protocols.
And I do find getting into the point of meditation for like these specific executives that you are coaching, it helps a lot getting into this mindfulness state, because they're always maybe thinking about what's next, what do they need to implement to work on. They have this specific way of thinking and trying to make things better. So I find if you get into, as you say, field of their day, of having something written down, reflecting on it, finding the purpose, also feeling the gratification of what they've achieved. I think that's key, because sometimes it's like they're just maybe go, go, go. And it's good because that's why they're high achievers. But also that part of being where they need to be, right? Sometimes if they're having dinner with their family, they might be thinking of the meeting for the next day. And that's a
Happens
great
all the
thing that
time.
you might be working with them
Mhm.
to help them
Yeah.
through their journey.
Yeah. And I think so. One of the things that that routinely comes up with a lot of these well, again, they're, a lot of them are guys. So they feel nervous about not being available to their boss, or to their colleagues, or anything else. And so so usually what I do is I try to kind of have some sort of like a moratorium on the phone or the laptop for at least an hour in the evening when they are around their family. And so, but not only just to do that themselves, but just to let other people know, hey, look, if you want to talk later, we can talk later. I have to kind of spend an hour here, and however it is, if you're single, just spend some time, make a good dinner, and just sit with yourself for a bit. but have that time that you're able to unplug, because you're going to be a lot more effective if you are able to unplug. And that helps really the whole creative process around it. If you're too close to something and you're just thinking about it constantly, you're not going to really get a different perspective on it. So you're going to keep coming up with the same ideas that you have over time. And if it's something that you keep stewing over, it's actually better for you if you take a moment to not think about it, and to go for a walk, go for a walk with your kids or your wife, or any friend, and talk about anything but work, and then when you come back, sometimes you have some inspiration about it. You're like, oh wow, I got this. That's why I wrote another post about why do you think that there's so much inspiration in the shower? Because all these people say like, oh, I came up with this thing in the shower. And I'm like, because that's the last place where you're not really getting inundated with information. I'm sure there's some people that have their gadgets in the shower, but it is like the last place where, there's no TV, there's no laptop, your phone presumably is not in the shower. So it's not uncommon that these folks will actually have some of these interesting ideas that come from that. Or, it used to be in the bathroom, but now everyone takes their phone into the bathroom. But it's proven over time that once you're able to, to sit with yourself and not think about anything, there are neurons that that have been dormant for a while that start to kick in. So there's a lot of neuroscience that proves a lot of these different aspects. And so I help a lot of these folks to tap into that. And it's interesting, the more they practice a lot of this, the more they start to kind of get greedy for it too. Like, oh yeah, no, I need to spend some time not talking about this. And then, and then you can kind of sort of spread the news to your other colleagues. Hey, like I've been doing this thing where I sort of check out for a little bit. And then, when I come back, I seemingly become more productive and I have different insights on what it is that we're doing. Maybe we can all try that. And not everyone's open to it, but the folks that, that's something that I kind of bang the drum on quite a bit. And when they're at a point where they are starting to see it routinely helping them, then that's where they become kind of the proselytizers themselves. And then they kind of spread the good news. So, and that's, I think that's the biggest part of what I can hope to do with a lot of these folks. Cause, I do a lot of, maybe some strategic and operational planning for a lot of these folks. I try to learn more about the business, but I really want to get them into a place where they are able to think a little bit more clearly on how best to do some of their, like if it's a forecast or if it's, how best we just formed this team and how best do we utilize everyone's talents based on, what they can do, how old they are, their connections and everything else. And it's funny because, just me saying to them, hey, I'm going to run this meeting for a little bit. You guys just sit there, put your phones down, just listen to me. I put the agenda together. Let me kind of walk you through this. And if you guys can teach me a little bit about how you're thinking about this, then maybe we can start memorializing some of the, the nuggets that are going to come out of this. And I'll see some of these guys and, they're so busy, especially like, we just came off the summer, some of these folks, they have, kids going to camps and they're doing so much during, even the work days, during the week. And they just feel like when they're in the office, they're just so in the red that they can't really think outside of, really doing a lot of just menial tasks like emailing and making a quick phone call. And they don't really have the time to do like the real the heavy brain work where it's, strategic kind of thinking. And so when I create these spaces for them to just sort of like relax a little bit, I can see them like their shoulders just sort of drop at one point. And then like they start going, you know what, I'm thinking about this and we might want to change our approach. You can see the wheels spinning in their mind a little bit. You're like, okay, good. They're in a place where they feel like, they can just kind of riff and it's like that brainstorming session where you don't really want to judge anything, but now with AI, I can record everything and get everything onto some sort of like, memorialization of what they're thinking. And then we can kind of really, sort of, look at like the optimal, input that they've had at one point and then kind of go over it again. It's just really getting them to that first state of mind where they're able to kind of drop like their conventional thinking about everything and think about it a little bit differently. So that's and I feel really good when I can get folks to that stage, and I get hungry for it too, and I look for a lot of different techniques and how to get certain people there as well. Some people are, it takes a little bit longer to get them there. So
And well, you have lots of experience, and
mhm,
obviously, you know how to manage different personalities, I guess, and the way they think and interact with
mhm,
others. So that's great. And getting into the like AI or technology components, I know we almost have to wrap it up, but also
mhm,
to know like which tools you find you like having in place
mhm,
for the people you support, your clients are
mhm,
in place that you are leveraging or that will be great for you to have for them within their journey.
mhm. Yeah. So there's different kinds for different utilities. So I mean, I use Canva and ChatGPT for kind of a lot of basic things. I use Claude for a lot of the stuff that I do on LinkedIn. And then Perplexity is really good for doing a lot of the market research. And we want to agentize it as well, so that they're all kind of like a lot of the streams of consciousness that you're thinking are all in the same channel, so that it kind of learns, as far as what you're doing, and then how it can kind of expand on some of the different components, like if it's in real estate or if it's in biotech or it's in software. There's different ways to kind of look at competitive landscape and things like that. And then Notion I use kind of for myself, and I'm having one group in the commercial real estate use the Notion and the AI that comes with that. And then Read AI with Zoom, I use that and then Otter AI just to kind of record things. I think the more we can record a lot, the easier it is for us to keep a good record on everything. Because I used to use and I still do use a lot of the composition journals that I write in, but you're not going to catch everything all the time. So as long as you're there, and you still want to keep the creative process going in your own brain, and use AI as much as you can to do ideation and a lot of these different things that might be helpful, but make sure that you're kind of still doing your own work as well. You don't want to have everything sort of automated and then just kind of become a button pusher of all these different AI platforms. So but I use it a lot. I couldn't do what I'm doing right now without all the AI, without hiring a few people. So and so I'm just a one-man show myself. So eventually I know I'm going to have to scale and bring someone else on, but AI definitely helps with that. And I'm coaching a lot of folks on how to implement AI as well. And it's not always easy with folks that are in some of these larger companies too, because they have firewalls that will block some of the AI, and
Yeah.
they might have to go through their own network and put it on their phones, or do whatever they have to do in the evening when they're not on the network of the big companies. And it's funny because I was coaching someone from Apple, and they were doing it at Apple, and Apple's just like on the front end of so much AI, and they kind of have this crappy AI platform that they can only use when they're on site. So it's kind of a little bit of a sort of a contradiction in terms there. So, but yeah, and that's a lot of kind of what I've been coaching people on lately, because guys that are my age may or may not be using AI. Anyone who's probably younger is already kind of taking advantage of it. So so I try to keep guys up to speed on what's the latest and greatest.
Amazing. I think that's a great way. I find, as you mentioned, it's a tool that is there for you to leverage and use it to your advantage and provide more value with what you do best rather
Mhm.
than administrative work. So I find
Right.
that that will be in a nutshell my conclusion.
Hmm. Yeah.
And well, it has been great talking to you today. Below we'll be sharing all the info to for anyone that is interested in following you, learning more about you, or contacting you. It's going to be
Hmm.
available,
Yeah.
and we'll obviously wait to hear more of how you're growing. I'm pretty sure you'll need a full team soon because
Mhm.
it's amazing how you're changing others and how your story started. Thinking maybe Navy SEALs might have the courage for doing anything, but it's
Mhm.
obviously an important way to see, or a different approach. The perspective you take when you're doing something is specifically to the military, to tactics and other things rather than the corporate world. So
Mhm.
it's a great way to learn from them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. Anyone who wants to reach me, I do a lot on LinkedIn. I have my own website as well, and it's primepeakcoach.com. I'm starting to get a little bit more into Instagram and TikTok, but I haven't really done a whole lot on that on those. It takes I need to hire a social media manager at some point. So but anyway, I really appreciate you having me on your show, and best of luck in this forum. It's something that's really needed that especially with folks out there that are really kind of struggling with their health these days, especially in the US. So
Thank you, Gary. And talking about giving back, the way you mentioned, like how can you build that sense of accomplishment and feeling better? This is what I'm doing, my podcast. So it totally resonated with me on what you mentioned. So thank you, Gary.
absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Have a
Appreciate it.
great afternoon.
You too.
Bye.